All right, Hangouts live. All right, shall we get started, guys?
Let's do
Let's
it.
go.
Let's do it. So, good evening, everyone. It's Monday, November 10th. Thanks for joining us for the fifth episode of the DC Executive Hangout. And I'm Jared Gold, and this is my co-host, or is it co-hostess? I don't know the exact lingo, but Jamila Corbett.
Hey.
All right, so really excited to have you all here. And please feel free to share the link to the show with others or tweet about it using the hashtag DC Executive Hangout. So I've been really dying to meet the guests we have on tonight. Really excited. Our guest is Michael Chasen, who is the founder and CEO of SocialRadar, which provides users with real-time information about those near them. In mid-2013, SocialRadar raised $12.75 million of venture capital and is based in the DC area. And prior to SocialRadar, Michael was co-founder and CEO of Blackboard, which is the online education platform that myself and many others my age have used, and people younger than me still use, which was sold for $1.64 billion in 2011, so a pretty small exit, right, Michael? And so Michael will be answering questions today related to tech entrepreneurship. So Michael is, without a doubt, one of the most prominent entrepreneurs in the DC area. So without further ado, please welcome Michael Chasen.
Thank you, and very excited to be here.
Awesome. So just to start out here, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, maybe your upbringing, your education, and have you always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Sure. Well, I've been here in the D.C. area for quite some time. I went to American University undergraduate, got my degree in computer science, went out to Georgetown, got my MBA, and then I ended up working at KPMG Pete Marwick in downtown D.C. as well, in their higher ed technology consulting group. Worked there for a year, and I was actually working with my old roommate from college, Matthew Batinsky. And we saw a trend taking place. We were working with a lot of colleges and universities that were spending millions of dollars wiring the dorm room and the classroom to the internet, but they weren't buying any software that made that useful for teaching and learning. So we decided to quit our jobs to design software that would let schools bring their education online. And I literally did it maybe about a year and a day after starting my very first job. In fact, we actually kind of came up with the idea of starting Blackboard about like a week or two earlier, but I said, I am not quitting my job until I worked there for 1 year, because I knew I had at least something on my resume that had 1 year work experience. So we literally waited a week before then putting in our letter of resignations.
Wow. Okay, that's really random. I wouldn't associate KPMG with that kind of stuff. When I think of KPMG, I think of obviously accounting, really complex, overpriced software to the government, etc. So that's a really unique start. That's so funny how that happened.
And back when I started at KPMG, the accounting firms were able to do both accounting and consulting, and then with Sarbanes-Oxley, those rules changed, and they had to actually diversify and divest themselves of the consulting practice, so it really just became an audit firm. But before that, they did a large amount of consulting as well as auditing, and I was in the consulting group.
Okay, great. And was Blackboard your first business venture, or did you do any other things before then?
Well, I mean, certainly, I think when I now look back upon my history, kind of even prior to college, I guess I was always entrepreneurial, although I don't think that that was a term that I had thought of or even really knew about. When I was back in high school, I did some technology consulting for some local businesses, helped get them set up on computers. I ran kind of different businesses out of my dorm room during college. So I think I was always in the mix of being interested in being my own boss and starting a company, although Blackboard was certainly the first venture where I was literally quitting my job and working full-time on something.
Right. Okay. Cool. And so tell us now, after you obviously built Blackboard up into a really successful company, right? You could have just hung out and travel the world and do fun stuff, but you're back at it again, doing other kinds of fun stuff. And so how did you even come up for the idea of SocialRadar?
I always knew that if I ever ended up leaving Blackboard, I would want to just try to go do it all again. I love the idea of creating companies. I love the idea of creating technologies that can have a big influence on the world. It's really just a passion of mine. And look, I didn't start Blackboard to go raise a lot of capital and take a company public and make a bunch of money. And for the same reason, those weren't the driving factors of starting SocialRadar. It was the idea that technology is just changing so much, and wanting to be a part of that wave of change that was taking place. Being the CEO of Blackboard, I was in a very good position. I used to spend a lot of time on college campuses, and we would see early technology trends really start and take bloom at these different institutions. For example, we saw Facebook launch at Harvard and then spread to other schools. We saw the trend of kids showing up in their dorm rooms, not bringing any TVs to campus, watching all of their shows on the internet on their computer. Similarly, over the last year or two while I was at Blackboard, we started to see the proliferation of location-based services. We saw students not only checking in everywhere on Foursquare, but if you were a group of students and you were freshmen now in college, you might use Apple Find My Friends to show where you were all of the time. And even though this isn't a trend that's hit mainstream outside of the young millennials yet, it's one that's coming. There's over 6 billion location events a year now on Facebook, 6 million check-ins a day on Foursquare. Over half the apps in the App Store have some form of location technology or location services. So this is obviously a technology trend that is early on, but I think continuing to just sweep across all of the different types of applications or uses you might find on your smartphone. And I knew that that was something I wanted to be a part of, and great opportunity.
Hey, go ahead, Jamila. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, I think I'm definitely in agreement in terms of the location-based thing, and I think that's the main. I think that's probably the main benefit of smartphones, right? Is they obviously have a lot of processing power, but just not only to their location services that they can provide, but the accuracy that they can provide it with, right? Within a matter of 15, 20 feet, right? Or even closer if you're, like Tile and all those kinds of things, where it's like a lost and found on your phone. And so I think just the automating all the geolocation-based stuff, it opens up all the doors as opposed to just processing power, which I think we haven't totally on mobile phones. Like we haven't completely bridged the gap between phone and PC, but we're working on it, And I think the location-based, I think that's definitely one of the more exciting things to be in for smartphones, if not the most exciting.
Yeah, the example I always give is I always ask people, I say, before you had a smartphone in your pocket, did you used to carry around a map or an atlas? And of course, most people did not, right? But now most people use Google Maps or Apple Maps almost every day or every other day. People used to not wonder where they're going to go eat and then just try to kind of ask locals, hey, where should I go right around here? Now almost every day people pull out their phone like, hey, where should I go grab some food? What's near me? And these are just the most basic implementations of using location technology. This is going to become so much more prevalent. You'll be able to not only know what stores are around you, but using SocialRadar technology, you can now tell who's around you. You can say, hey, are any of my friends nearby, or I'm about to go eat in this restaurant. Do I know anybody here? You could walk in to a place that you're maybe shopping at and instantly know, hey, do they have the inventory I'm looking for right here in this store? Or if not, what's the closest store I can buy this at? I mean, there's so many different uses for giving you relevant information based on exactly where you are. This is already a big trend, but I think it's going to be the next big thing about mobile devices.
And I think that's a very awesome segue into the next question. And how did you actually validate the idea for SocialRadar? And then when you determined that you were onto something, did you follow a methodology like the Lean Startup? And did you bootstrap the company and then seek funding?
Those are all good questions. So look, I'm a big believer in something that Steve Jobs once said, where he said if you had asked people who were driving horse and buggies what would they wanted to have told you a car, they would have said faster horses. Similarly, when we started Blackboard, our very first round of venture capital financing, our investors called up a bunch of schools and said, hey, would you use technology to put courses online? And all the schools said no. That they had a lot of teachers who wouldn't use technology, and the students weren't asking to get their course materials on the web. Now, obviously, we know the effect of both of those is cars is obviously a main form of transportation everywhere. Over half the schools in the world are using Blackboard technology, and the rest are using some form of e-learning technology. So for me, validating the idea isn't about going out to market and saying, hey, would you use this type of technology? For me, validating the idea is really about saying, hey, you know what? How is this technology going to change the way people might use smartphones, or the way people might interact with each other that they haven't yet necessarily thought of? And that was really then the idea behind SocialRadar. It was saying, you know what, let's start developing that technology today of where people of how people are going to use that technology in the future.
Okay. I mean, I think that's a really interesting approach, right? Because obviously the lean startup is kind of it's like the Bible to every nerd in the world, right? They say, hey, if I could just throw up a landing page and create some cool screenshots, I can go get venture funding and change the world. And so you did it where you're like, you know what? I know this is going to be a big thing. I'm going to be part of the future. No one is going to subscribe to it unless I make the vision, and then they see what wow, I've been missing these things, kind of like
Yeah.
the horse and buggy
Yeah, that's well said.
scenario. So I think that's really, really interesting, and yeah, I mean that is really hard to pull off. That's for sure. So I salute you on that.
It's not easy, but look, I don't think doing a startup any kind, whether you're following the lean startup methodology or other methodologies that are out there, I mean, they're all equally difficult paths to follow.
Okay. So, and then Michael, I was wondering, what do you think separates an entrepreneur from a wantrepreneur?
Look, I meet people who have great ideas all the time. In fact, what's been terrific is as an active part of the community, I meet with not only tons of startups, but people that are at jobs that have ideas and want to pursue them or come to me and say, hey, what are the first steps on how I get started? And I always love helping other people and connecting and assisting them in any way. I mean, so many people helped me personally along the way with both Blackboard and even now in SocialRadar. I love being part of the community and giving back. That being said, I mean, I guess the way that I would define the difference between those two things is really maybe only one thing that is the difference between an entrepreneur and a wantrepreneur, and that is taking that final step and doing it. I mean, a lot of people like, I got this great idea, but I'm not going to leave my job and go do it, or I can't do it full time for this reason or that reason. And I always say to them, well, look, if you don't think it's a good enough idea for you to go leave your job or for you to do and engage in full time, then certainly not a good idea for someone to invest in, right? So
Right.
To me, it's just taking that step and actually going forward and executing on your vision. Lots of people have great ideas. I've heard terrific ideas over the years from a number of people, but a terrific idea isn't just suddenly turned overnight into a great company. I always tell people, people say to me, wow, Blackboard, you sold it for almost $2 billion in such a short time period. What an overnight success. I say yes. 15 years of overnight successes. So similarly, the real difference between being an entrepreneur and not being an entrepreneur is then taking the step to try to execute against that great idea that you have.
You make a great point, Michael. And, there are a lot of people out there that have these big dreams of entrepreneurship. But what are some tips for actually getting funding for that dream, at any level, seed, Series A, for a project or business?
Well, I think building upon what I just said, the very first step is it needs to be something you're doing full-time. I mean, I meet a lot of people who are doing things part-time on the side, and I understand people's circumstances are different, and not everyone has the capability to then just be able to work and not take a paycheck or may have other responsibilities. But it's very hard to go raise capital if you're pitching, hey, this is a great idea, invest your money, and you haven't yet invested the thing that you can give, which is your time. The other thing that I tell people when they're thinking of starting their own idea is just make sure it is something that you are passionate about. Starting your own company is not just about picking an idea and pursuing it. You end up living that idea. Even now, when I get up in the morning, first thing I do when I get up is I read the emails I missed while I was sleeping. I respond to some things. I'll write down a to-do list. As I then go in the shower, I'm thinking of additional things I need to do. As soon as I get out, I quickly jot those down on a piece of paper. While I'm getting ready in the morning, I might be on the phone. I then go get into the car and make conference calls on the way into the office. I get to the office, I probably have a breakfast meeting, and then I'm getting a cup of coffee with somebody else. I then have the opportunity to sit down and do work, and that might be followed by a lunch meeting with someone in the company, followed by a second lunch with someone outside of the company. Continue to work. We might have work late night here at the office where I'm eating dinner with the team. Then I go to a dinner meeting. Then I might even get drinks with a potential business partner. Then I'm back at the office. Then on the way home, I'm making calls to my connections on the West Coast before I finally get home, get a chance to see the family before making sure everybody's in bed and going to work on the computer. So you can see, one, that apparently not only am I working all the time, but you can see why I'm gaining a couple of pounds, having all these multiple meals. But the point that I'm making is if you're going to be working that much and it takes that amount of time to get any idea off the ground, it better be something that you love and you're truly passionate about.
You made me tired just hearing that agenda. My God, all these multiple kinds of meetings in every kind of fashion imaginable with food and drinks and on the way in the car and things like that.
Yeah, I really should just meet people in my office. I don't know why I'm eating all the time. I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know. But Now, one thing I wanted to just tracing back to the question before when you said what separates an entrepreneur from a wantrepreneur, I would agree with you that the number one thing is just honestly just pulling the trigger. Stop talking, just do it and see what happens. And then one thing that I would say is that the people that obviously you've done infinitely more networking, you've been around this scene longer than me. But one thing that I've really noticed is that the people that are going to be successful entrepreneurs are really good networkers, and they're not just taking, they're giving. So like when you said, for example, you like helping others, you like giving back, I think that's the first sign of like a real entrepreneur, as opposed to, all those people that you meet, they're like, hey, can I get advice? Hey this, hey that. They never ask you, you know what, Michael, what can I do for you, right? So would you agree with that?
Well, look, I mean, I want to be careful. Certainly some people who start companies are a little bit more on the business side, but many people that start companies are kind of strong on the technology side and might not be as good on the networking side. And look, I can also tell you, if people were looking for my advice while I was building Blackboard and growing up, I don't think my advice would have been any good. I mean, I just recognize now that I've learned a lot, so I try to network to really kind of give back to all those people that helped me then. So while I think that networking, look, it is a critical key piece of starting any company, I think as long as you're someone that can, if you can't network, partner with people that network, and you're someone who can reach out to help fill the maybe the areas that you may lack or the expertise that you don't have, that means you can get a company off the ground. I don't think it's a requirement to be a good networker, although it certainly helps because you can also partner with people who are.
Okay, so if you can't do it yourself, at least have someone that can be that sort of outreach arm. Okay, that's good. That's good. And
a wingman.
Yeah. Now, Michael, I find in addition to sort of your methodology, which is really, not standard anymore of just building it and seeing what happens, but I mean, you're a solo founder, like, and I think that's crazy, like that's awesome. And so what are your thoughts on being a solo founder versus having at least one co-founder? Because I think I read at one point somewhere that the perfect startup has like a 3-person founding team, right? They have the hacker being the technical person, the designer, and the hustler. So are you just all 3 of those people in one, or what's the deal, man? Why are you doing this alone both times?
Sure, no. Look, let me help put an end to that, Beth. Look, at Blackboard, technically there were 2 people that co-founded the company, myself and Matt Patinsky. But then very early on, we had 3 additional early employees, and we merged with another company. There were 7. Really, at this point, I think the first 30 people of the organization all consider themselves to be co-founders, and that is great because they all contributed to creating that core that started a company. Here at SocialRadar, I know technically people call me the founder of the company, but I started this with a handful of other people as well, and I consider all of them to be co-founders of the company because we're all working and starting it together. I just have a little bit more big name brand recognition than some of the other people. But I would equally say that everybody here that's helping contribute to SocialRadar is a co-founder of the company. And let me explain why. When you talk about co-founders, I agree with what you're saying. I don't believe it's something you can do alone. But I'm also not sure that the right number is 2 or 3. I think it takes a group of dedicated, passionate people to start a company. And however you define that group, that early on, that if the company succeeds, it will be because it was built on that core team, the culture that they created, and the work that they then were able to use as the infrastructure of the company to make it successful. So I consider really everybody here to be a co-founder.
And how exactly would you say is the best method for building the right team, and where do you go to seek talent? Is it someone that you know and trust, or are they recommended to you? How do you build that team?
That's a good question. I think the right answer is one of balance. Look, it's very hard when you're starting a company and you want people to put in tons of hours and work for free or no pay. So quite frankly, it better be people that you're good friends with or you trust. As you get a little bit bigger and a little bit more experience, you try to then balance that out by bringing up people from the outside who, as I was saying before, may have an expertise that you don't have, or something additional you need to the team. But I've always found that the right team for me personally was a mixture of people I was very close to that knew me well, that were willing to kind of risk everything and put a belief in what I was building, combined with people that could help us with that outside expertise in the areas that maybe we didn't know a lot about. So I think that balance is what's key to building a good team.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And then let's see here. What would you say are the best resources for people starting up in the DC area? Because I feel like it's kind of a best kept secret that DC is actually pretty good for startups. It's not Silicon Valley, but it's not a bad place here either.
Oh, I think, quite frankly, DC is one of the top places in the U.S. to create a startup, but especially in a couple of key areas like government, the military-industrial complex, education, policy, healthcare. I don't think for those areas, certainly there's not a better place to create a startup. And certainly outside of Silicon Valley, or obviously there's a lot of resources behind the startup scene also in New York. I put us right behind those two in one of the top areas to do a technology startup. And I think that's proven by not only the companies that are created in downtown DC, and then now the great networking we have through hubs like 1776 and WeWork and a lot of the other incubators as well, but also just looking down the Virginia Tech corridor. We had all the telecoms, companies like AOL and others that grew to be media giants, all started out of this area. So I think it's a fantastic place to create a startup and a lot of resources, and in particularly those areas around the government and education and healthcare, where you really can shine being so close to the government policymakers that affect those industries.
Sure, and so you briefly said 1776, and you said WeWork. And what are some other good resources or hangouts, though, in terms of, let's say, I figure meetup.com has so many meetups in this area. So any other, I guess, location-based meetups that people could really flock to besides, because 1776 I feel like is really intimidating. There's all these I feel like so many of them are like venture-backed companies. They already have so much. They've already made so much traction. So maybe for people just starting out, where would they go?
Oh, well, first of all, there's DC Tech meetups. It's one of the largest meetup groups that are out there. They get together very often. If you're a woman in tech, there's a number of great organizations you can join, and you also have Canvas, which is a great networking spot or incubator spot for companies just getting started, and there's easily a dozen more as well, depending on your interest or background that you can join. I mean, I think that's what's so great about this region. And you can find a lot of those online and look to join them or organizations that you can, that'll give you a workspace to get your company started out of.
And everybody wants to be the next Facebook or Twitter. Everyone wants to create a startup like that. But when should people start a startup versus when should they get a job? How do you know that you're cut out to be a techpreneur?
Look, I'm a big fan of the startups and entrepreneurs. So my answer is you should do a startup until you can't pay your rent anymore. Then definitely get a job. Especially if your parents' basement is not a viable living option for you. That being said, look, the right time I think for a lot of people is just out of school, before they built up, before you may have a family or you have other responsibilities that require your attention, and making a paycheck is always a good time to do a startup, but it's also never too late. I have a lot of friends that even later in life quit their jobs and just joined the startup train and have done very well. But you also, I think, got to give yourself a limit. If it's not something that works out after a year or 2 years, and if you can't support yourself anymore, certainly, it might not be the exact right industry for you.
I think me and Jerry can agree to you, because we both quit our jobs in our 20s, and we started our own businesses. So I totally agree. As long as you have no real commitments, I can always go home and live with my parents. It's fine.
Good. Well, actually, if they have some extra room, I have a few other entrepreneurs that I could probably, recommend also that might be looking for a place to live soon. So I'm glad your parents have some extra room. They might be renting out.
I like it. And just piggybacking off that question, Michael, in terms of persistence, like you said, if you're passionate about something, keep on the startup train until until you're homeless, essentially, or right before then, actually. So, but in terms of like what are some telltale signs that would indicate that maybe your business isn't viable? Obviously, if you don't have any paying customers, but what would you say are some things where in the back of your head you question the assumptions that you were originally testing?
I don't think I could give you a generic number statistic that you should be looking at. It's really, you got to hold yourself accountable for the numbers that make your business successful. So, if you're Twitter, you care about the number of people that are tweeting and the number of people that are listening to tweets. I mean, if you're Facebook, you care about your user base. At Blackboard, we cared about licensing institutions. So there's so many different metrics that you might look at. Look, the important thing is that you hold yourself accountable to those metrics. So you got to determine early on what's going to make you a success, and then figure out whether you're achieving those goals or not.
Seems like an easy plan. I mean, pretty much holding yourself accountable, especially when you're a solo founder. At the end of the day, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what am I doing with my life?
I say that often, and look, the hard thing is then being able to say, hey, you know what, something's working or not working, and then being able to adjust your direction to try to take advantage of the market that's in front of her. You say, you know what, this is not going to be an opportunity. Packing up your bags and just calling it a day.
Sure. And then Jamil, I think you wanted to ask a question as well.
Yeah. What advice would you have for those pursuing large-scale tech-related startups?
I think that it's very important to really, no matter how large the opportunity you're going after is to start small. We found at Blackboard we got a very small group of early institutions that were great backers and great references for us. Then we built upon that, and as we were building, we got to scale out our technology more. And there were some years we grew too fast. When we suddenly went from 100 institutions to 1,000 institutions, we ran into technical problems at that level of scale. So it's really important that as you grow, you are just continuing to focus on just those core referenceable clients and growing, really I want to say almost a stair-stepped approach that at each level you're making sure that you have the right infrastructure as a company to support that level and what comes next.
Absolutely. I mean, and especially in sort of these platform businesses, Blackboard is obviously a platform, SocialRadar is obviously a platform, and they're at just absurd scales, like just obnoxiously large. And so I think you bring up an excellent point is, fortunately, though, there's so much like technology infrastructure like on demand, right? Amazon Web Services, for example, and things like that, that probably makes it, you probably wish you had those in the early Blackboard days, right?
Oh my goodness! The ability for people to start a company now that the barrier has gotten so low. Basically here at SocialRadar, you show up. I just give you a notebook computer. We use your cell phone to have you take and make calls if you need to make any calls. We just give you a desk. We have a Wi-Fi network set up, and we don't even have a phone system. We use Google for everybody's mail and sharing of documents. When I started Blackboard, we had to have our own PBX system just for a phone. We had to have our own server network. Everything was hardwired. We had to pay for an Outlook exchange for everybody, buy Microsoft Office for everyone. It was $1 million in startup costs, and as opposed to just a few thousand. It's really incredible what you can do today with all these free services that are available.
Oh man, yeah. When you said paying for Outlook, that makes me sad on the inside. So I feel your pain from years before. And then I guess, Michael, what I was thinking in terms of SocialRadar is, like, for example, I saw on your website that you have a Google Glass developer, and I think Google Glass is like the perfect like pairing with SocialRadar, right? Because it is a heads-up display. It is like almost out of a video game where you walk into the room and you see these people and how you relate to them. So where do you want this? Do you picture the future of this company to being primarily in wearables, and where would you say you want to be in 1, 5, 10 years, and whatever you're allowed to tell us, feel free to share.
Sure. Look, I think the future, quite frankly, of every company is going to be in wearables. Whether it's making sure that your software works with the new iWatch or the future of Google Glass, I think those type of devices are going to become really an immersed part of everybody's day. Now, that being said, look, before we get there, I still think that's a few years away. So while I do have a developer that's focused on Google Glass in the wearable market, the majority of our resources are really focused on getting the right software out for the smartphone, iPhone and Android devices. And in the foreseeable future, I think that's still where all the opportunity is going to lie. But you got to recognize, though, that there will eventually be this paradigm shift into the wearable market space. That's why I like kind of keeping my toe in the water today, just to be prepared for when that giant shift comes.
Wow, I mean, it's a really exciting time, obviously, to be in that, like, right on the cusp of the wearable space. So that's going to be really cool when you're obviously you guys have a lot of traction so far, and so I think going forward, just continuing to get users and like just scale so quickly, it's going to, knock on wood, make it a lot harder for those future incumbents that just use the social media, APIs and developer kits and things like that to even try to dethrone you, right? So you're doing a good job of getting in, kind of like Peter Thiel would be a fan of your, seeing the future and making it happen before everyone else follows. So Michael, how do you imagine the future to be different with real-time information about others, near us?
Look, I find it a little bit weird that you could walk into a restaurant or go to an event or into a meeting and not know that a good friend of yours is sitting right around the corner. There are 5 other friends attending the same event or conference that you're at, or someone in the meeting is a person that lives on your street or went to your school. When right now there's 1 billion people around that are carrying smartphones, which are in a sense location beacons. There's 2 billion user profiles up in the cloud, and no one yet has been successful about integrating those 2 pieces of information so that you can walk down the street or go to a meeting or attend an event or a conference and instantly know who's in the room or who's around you, how you're connected to them, and what they've been up to. But yet all that information exists up in the cloud. So the idea behind SocialRadar and where I think things are going in the future is just that. So you may not find it weird that you go to a restaurant and you sit down, and at a table maybe only 2 feet away is someone else that you probably don't speak to your entire dinner, but they're sitting so close to you. And you might have a friend who's literally just at the bar around the corner and not even know it. Yet all these people have devices that are in effect broadcasting that they're there, and all their social information is up in the cloud. And if you just cross-reference it, you might realize that the table next to you is someone that lives on your street, and maybe 2 tables down is someone that went to your school, and that your friend is just out of sight at the bar. Maybe you choose to engage with them, or maybe you don't, but at least you have that knowledge. So the idea about SocialRadar is giving you that real-time information on people around you, giving you that knowledge to be able to act or not act to your surroundings. And that's what I think that this location technology is all about.
You make a very interesting point. So do you think the future is heading towards total transparency when it comes to technology?
Well, I don't think it's about total transparency, because I think that you still have to have the power to control it. So for example, in SocialRadar, we let you broadcast your location so everyone can see it. You can limit it to just your friends. You can be anonymous or even invisible. So it's about having the ability to do that, but then giving you the control to decide when you want to do it.
Yeah, and I was reading, obviously I feel like that's probably the biggest barrier you have with SocialRadar is people love the idea, but people just assume, oh, what about privacy and all those things? It's just once you take the time to educate yourself slightly on just the UI of any app, whether it's SocialRadar, whether it's Facebook, whatever, you see that they actually have fantastic privacy settings. And it's just about just being aware of, it's like when you leave the house, you close the windows or lock the doors, right? It's kind of like that. That's how I
that actually reminds me, I forgot to lock my door in my house. But yeah, that's made easier now that you can actually even control your locks in your house with your iPhone. But yes, very much so. So you just need to be aware of the privacy controls and then make sure you're using them. So that's an important part of what we built into the technology of SocialRadar.
Sure. And now we have some sort of more fun questions to ask you, more interesting ones, or not more interesting, but more just kind of random entrepreneurial about you.
Go ahead.
So what would you say was your biggest failure, and how did it impact you, or biggest set of failures, or whatever?
It's going to be so hard to narrow that down to just a few. What I always tell people is that along the way at Blackboard, even here at SocialRadar, I think I continue to make mistakes, I probably say almost every day. But the thing is, and the thing that's the most important is that you learn from them. I rarely make a mistake twice, definitely not more than 3 or 4 times. And if you can really just identify that along the way you will take missteps, you may head in the wrong direction, or you may fumble, as long as you can recover, then figure out what you need to do to fix that and build upon it and not do it again, that's how you make a successful company. So it's not about the mistakes you make, it's about how you learn from them and how you move past them.
I love it. And what about, do you have any favorite quotes or sayings or sort of mantras, things that you think about or tell yourself every day? I mean, I love these motivational posters. Like, you couldn't have picked a better spot in your office, I don't think. Like the Rise and Grind, I love that poster.
Yeah, so besides all the poster sayings, look, 2 of the quotes, one of which I mentioned a little bit earlier in the interview, just what Steve Jobs had said about, trying to guess what comes next, and how if you ask people at the horse and buggy what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, and they obviously would have said the car. So similarly, I think that the true entrepreneurs are the ones that can actually guess what's going to happen next and go against the grain of what society may say or believe. And that to me is also something that I live by. I think that the best ideas are the ones that not that they haven't been discovered yet, but might actually go against the grain of what other people would believe are going to happen, and that's where the best opportunity lies.
And do you have any particular favorite books, tools, or apps that you use in your day-to-day life?
I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. In particular, everything from The Tipping Point to Blink to Outliers. and I'm a big fan of kind of those type of social economic books like Freakonomics and others, and all of them around the central theme of like looking at a situation in a slightly different way than you might otherwise, to either understand what the inputs of that situation are, the results would be, or how it might actually appear, how it actually might be different than it normally appears. And to me, those are kind of very entrepreneurial concepts, so I'm a big fan of those type of books.
And what about apps or tools or things that you rely on?
I try to download an app every week. I'm always trying out the new apps, whether it's games that I'm not good at or productivity tools that I am also not good at using. So I really like to actually kind of cycle through and just check out all of the different new technologies. And it's so exciting to see what comes out on the App Store every single week, how there's just people are thinking of whether it's old apps and new ways or the new apps. To be honest, this week I got most excited about the full Microsoft Office suite being available on my iPhone. So, right there, I'm anticipating that's. I'm a heavy user of PowerPoint, and I like all the editing capabilities of Word. So, even though that's kind of like older, stodgy software, I was very excited to see that now available on your iPhone.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And now, Michael, here's the last real question that we have for you. And so this is one that I'm actually stealing from a podcast that I used to really like called Entrepreneur on Fire. So let's say you wake up tomorrow with $500 in your pocket and a laptop, internet connection, whatever. The world is the exact same as it is. You know everything you know now, and your food and shelter is taken care of. But you don't have any of your companies, any of your connections. What would you do?
Play Call of Duty. Is that an option?
You don't have an Xbox. You don't start with that.
I don't.
So all you have is $500. You got no expenses, and you got a laptop. And based on what you've said and based on your track record, you're clearly not going to be playing a lot of Call of Duty, or at least not for the long term.
Well, I think I would assume that now I'm some kind of post-apocalyptic world.
Is that no, world's the exact same.
The world's the exact same.
It's like getting sucked through a wormhole or something. I don't know.
Got it. Well, I would instantly contact the government and start researching wormholes. I would say, oh my God, I was in an alternate reality, and I would try to I'd probably then somehow commercialize wormholes, which I think will obviously be the next great travel technology after the space shuttle. If that is indeed what really happened to me. I mean, I would definitely do a lot of research to figure out why I only have $500. Probably contact the FBI because that means I've lost a lot of money, probably been robbed. And I don't know what happened to my companies, but probably got some upset investors too. Maybe I'd go into hiding so they couldn't find me. But it does sound suspicious, so I'm just going to go with alternative reality and immediately contact the government and try to monetize that in some way.
Okay, this question totally backfired because you took it way too literally and comedically.
No, sorry.
Well, let's say an entrepreneur, they have a ton of knowledge, they just have $500, no expenses, they got a computer and Wi-Fi. What are they doing? What should they do here?
So right away, I would tell that entrepreneur to hire me. My fee is simple. It's $500. And I would sit down with them, and through a process, I really would help them figure out what to do. Meanwhile, I'm $500 richer.
Perfect. Okay, Michael. Well, we've really enjoyed having you on here. Just, do you have any last plugs or any things you're working on or any things you want to announce to the world as we put this up on Google Plus, Hangouts, and YouTube?
Always looking. We're still in the late beta stage at SocialRadar. Always looking for people to download our app and give us more feedback. Check us out on iTunes. Check us out at Google Play. Would love to hear from you. You can also contact me directly. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Michael Chasen, or go ahead and friend me on Facebook, or just email me at michael@socialradar.com. I love connecting with other entrepreneurs, and I always love hearing your feedback on the products I'm working on. And thank you very much for taking the time and chatting with me today.
Hey, thank you very much, man. You had a ton of great nuggets, and you kept it fun and lively, and we appreciate that. I'm definitely going to try to stop in your office at some point if that's okay, and I'll definitely play around with SocialRadar. I had the app on my phone. I think I still do, and I actually had it in the very early stages when it was it was called Peanut something.
Yeah, Orange Peanut.
Orange Peanut. Yeah. So I was in there, man, from the start. So yeah, I'll have to stop by the office and pick your brain some more.
Would love to chat. Thank you very much. Thanks
so much for having
Pleasure, Michael.
for being on.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.